Welcome back to Sunday Edition. Later today, a memorial service will be held at Riverside Church for Dr. Betty Shabazz. The widow of Dr. Malcolm X lost her fight for life on Monday after suffering severe burns. Among those in attendance at today's service will be a friend and colleague, Dr. Edison Jackson, president of Brooklyn's Medgar Evers College. Welcome to Sunday Edition, and thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you.
Tell me about Dr. Shabazz and what it was about her that seems to resonate so deeply with the community at large, and especially the African-American community. I mean, obviously she had a place in history, but there was much more going on there, wasn't there?
Dr. Shabazz was a very special person, having a very warm spirit that resonated throughout the campus and the community. She had this capacity to bring people to her and to get people to do that which was the best they could. I mean, she had this uncanny ability to get people to understand that they had a power within themselves to do better and to have some control over their lives. She was not one on our campus to be just profiling. I mean, she was one who was looking for a need that needed to be met, and she would be about the business of trying to do that. And what I liked about her was that she was not trying to promote Dr. Betty Shabazz, but rather Medgar Evers College, the students, the faculty, my office, me, and so here's a lady who is internationally known, nationally known, and yet she can walk with those of us on the campus. She's dined with kings and queens, heads of state, but she never lost the common touch. And I think that's what a lot of people could identify with, that here's this wonderful, grand person, but yet she would take time out and say, how are you doing? What's wrong? What do you need? And we know that a lot of people who have obtained her status would not be about that. And so that inspired us to, and she became very close to all of us. And she had a capacity to do that.
3 days before the horrible incident, June 1st, in her apartment in Yonkers, she attended a retirement dinner that you were present at. Tell me about what it was like to see her that final time.
Dr. Betty, as we call her, was full of life that whole week. I mean, she was just so happy, just smiling and just moving through the campus in an unusual way. And we had a retirement party for Dr. Bertie Gilmore, who's chairperson of our nursing department. And after the program itself, there was dancing. And I can now still see Dr. Betty dancing on the floor doing the electric slide. And she was just marvelous and into her own world doing the electric slide. And then if you ask her to dance, she would dance. Then you do the swing or do slow drag. And she was just moving with such grace that evening. We had, to add to that, we gave her a surprise birthday party. And
she had just turned 61, yes.
That week, and we really surprised her. And I had asked staff to keep her in her office until we got ready, and then I had to come over and said, I have some things to talk to you about. And she sat down, and I said, well, look, let's have some coffee. Let's go into the conference room and get some coffee. And we went into the room, and there were all of her colleagues, and saying, surprise! And she cried. I mean, we really put one over on her in terms of it being a surprise. And we had one little candle in the center, and we made all kinds of jokes about that, and asked her to do a wish, make a wish, and blow it out. And she came back the next day to say to me, she calls me Mr. President. Mr. President, that was a fine gesture. I really enjoyed that. And it was It was like a different kind of vibration, a spiritual vibration that was taking place that entire week.
You felt something different.
Something different. I didn't know what it was then. She had, and she was happy because this was commencement week coming up, and she was responsible for raising scholarship monies for our graduates. Mm-hmm. And she had been very successful at that. And everything was in order. Normally we are down to the wire in terms of selecting all the recipients. We had done all of that. And everything was in place for the next week. It's kind of uncanny in terms of all the things that fell in place that week with Dr. Betty. But she was a very special person to me. She oftentimes would come in the room and share with me and give advice when I was facing some very difficult decisions. She would share the wisdom and the kind of dilemma and that our husband went through when he was about to make a very important decision. And she would encourage me, you know, in terms of moving on and doing it.
She never ran away, really, from that legacy, being the wife of Malcolm X.
Absolutely not. I mean, she was true to that legacy, but it became a springboard for her moving on rather than a limitation of her persona. So that was to me a blending and a marriage of his legacy and who she was and who she became. So she was very comfortable with that, and she didn't dwell on Malcolm in terms of his legacy, but she used that as an instructive tool for herself and for those that she came in contact with.
We'll talk more about the legacy of Dr. Betty Shabazz when Sunday Edition continues.
As I cite those persons on whose shoulders we stand, when I cite people like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and John and Robert Kennedy and Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth and Percy Sutton from me, and Rosa Parks, I'll also add now Dr. Betty Shabazz.
Dr. Betty Shabazz has made a transition, but she is very mighty where she is. She's boundless where she is. She is strong where she is. She will certainly have our back where she is, but she'll also have her eye on you.
That was Atala Shabazz, the eldest daughter of Dr. Betty Shabazz, talking about her mother. Welcome back to Sunday Edition. My guest this morning is Dr. Edison Jackson, the president of Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn. Dr. Jackson worked very closely with Dr. Betty Shabazz, and I was touched at the public viewing at the depth of emotion among women of various races, but especially African-American women, because Dr. Shabazz had survived the murder of her very famous husband, Malcolm X, and then raised 6 children alone, as too many women do these days, and did so with such grace, and also excelled professionally and continued on all the other things. Tell me about that part of her, the mother, Betty Shabazz.
She was a great mother and loved very deeply her children. But she also had the capacity to be a mother to other children in our college and in the community.
Not an easy touch, though, right?
Not an easy one. And she saw the goodness, the capacity in people. And so she was about the business of nurturing that and helping that to grow. So that it is not, I'm not surprised that we saw the number of people and the number of African-American women who were there. But I think it's also significant that the number of African-American males who were there standing in line, and to touch the coffin, just to say that I want to say farewell. You meant so much to me as a person, and that you were able to transcend the vicissitudes of life. And if you could do that, then maybe there's some hope for me in doing this, a similar kind of thing. And so her life resonated in a very positive kind of way with the larger community. And she allowed us, the larger community, all of us, to have a piece of her and feel that we were not in competition with anyone else. We had our own little space with Dr. Betty.
She was a very famous person, sometimes put in the crosshairs of history or in the limelight of media attention in unpleasant circumstances. How did she react to the way we in the media treated her? I mean, the arrest of her daughter Kabila, about the Louis Farrakhan assassination plot. Everybody's interested. Everybody's interested that she blamed Louis Farrakhan for her husband's death. All these sensational moments where suddenly we're there, and then all the rest of the time we're not. How did she seem to react to that intensity of scrutiny in these situations?
With the grace and dignity of an angel. She had this saying that she shared with me, and I had not heard it before. And it goes like this: find the good and celebrate it. So even though all of those negative kind of things were taking place around her, and media attention and etc., she sought out and tried to find the good that would come out of it. And that is, to me, what sustained her over these years, and even with the situation with her daughter. There was some good to come out of that. And she was convinced that there was some good that would come out of it. And so that was, to me, her motto, and that she lived by. She was not controlled by her circumstance. They were not going to limit her. And so she was like, had a spiritual quality that allowed her to move beyond these physical conditions that might have been around her, to look beyond that and see something better. And that she had a responsibility to be a voice and a vehicle for making that happen.
Can you imagine or guess what she would want to happen to her grandson at this point? I mean, Betty, I know it's a reach, but we can only wonder.
Betty loved Malcolm, her grandson. And I believe that she would want us to embrace him and love him and nurture him. She was that kind of person. And she didn't carry animosity and hostility with her. She didn't carry that kind of excess baggage. She let that go by. And she was able to move beyond that. So based upon my experience with her and love for her, she would want us simply to not to deal with Malcolm, her grandson, in a harsh manner, but to love him and to do whatever is possible to heal the hurt that's there.
Something to remember as we prepare for a memorial service today, to remember the legacy of Dr. Betty Shabazz. I want to thank Dr. Jackson for joining me this morning and sharing his memories of Dr. Shabazz. Still ahead today, does the sight of a sign that says road work ahead raise your blood pressure? We'll take you to the person who can answer the questions you may have asked as 3 lanes merge into one when Sunday Edition returns.